What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you guys with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Okay, happy Tuesday, everybody. First up, we need to talk about the Ukraine conflict and China's reaction, as well as the broader geopolitical realities that China is facing due to the Russian invasion. As we discussed last week, it appears that many People's Republic of China officials and academics were taken off guard by the Russian invasion of Ukraine. After several days of unclear messaging, Beijing finally has a clearer position, which it has articulated. Through state media, it is largely calling the conflict a special military action, not an invasion or war. Yesterday, Foreign Minister Wang Yi laid out China's so-called 5-point position on the current Ukraine issue. These are, and I've shortened them for brevity: 1. China maintains that sovereignty and territorial integrity of all countries should be respected and protected. This position is consistent and clear-cut, and applies equally to the Ukraine issue. More on this seemingly contradictory statement shortly. 2. China advocates common, comprehensive, cooperative, and sustainable security. Quote, given NATO's 5 consecutive rounds of eastward expansion, Russia's legitimate security demands ought to be taken seriously and properly addressed. End quote. 3. China expresses concern for the people and wishes to see de-escalation. 4. China supports and encourages all diplomatic efforts conducive to a peaceful settlement of the Ukraine crisis. And 5. China believes that the UN Security Council should play a constructive role in resolving the Ukraine issue. Some of you may remember over the weekend, China abstained from a UN security vote to condemn Russia's actions in Ukraine. It looks like China is seeking a political win, acting as a peacemaker while maintaining its relations with both Russia and the European Union. This is a very difficult position to maintain, and frankly, so many of the Beijing policy-making elite seem to have been surprised by the war that it makes me question whether there is sufficient intellectual bandwidth, as well as, more critically, the right systematic or institutional mechanisms to deftly navigate the Russo-European geopolitical board as it is. We shall see in the coming weeks and months. Washington-based veteran China analyst Bill Bishop observed this morning, quote, the PRC system made Xi's relationship with Putin personal, so do not expect any sort of about-face from the PRC on relations with Russia. I think the more likely scenario is that the PRC continues its claimed approach of neutrality as it looks for an opportunity to reap the benefits from trying to help to negotiate a settlement. The financial sanctions against Russia, and especially the ones against the Russian Central Bank, must have confirmed every fear of the US's ability to wage financial war. How the PRC can protect against similar sanctions is unclear. End quote. Yesterday, Shanghai-based Chen Xin spoke to Chinese financial media about Chinese vulnerabilities to US financial sanctions, expressing, quote, the RMB cross-border payment system still relies on banks as nodes, which can be sanctioned and influenced. For example, China's own payment system can avoid the SWIFT system controlled by the United States, but the nodes in the middle are all banks. The United States can sanction these banks. If no one is allowed to do business with Chinese banks, and others rarely follow up and cooperate, then the system will not work. End quote. China has another tricky balancing act to pull off as well, both at home and overseas. For years, more than most countries, China has upheld the idea, rhetorically at least, that national sovereignty trumps all other concerns, that it is the highest concept of international relations. Indeed, in recent years, Beijing has bitterly criticized the United States and some others for far milder interference in the internal affairs of other countries. Yet now, Beijing won't even criticize a full-blown invasion. The contradiction is obvious, not just internationally, but also with some citizens domestically. And of course, while we're on Ukraine-China, we have to talk about the state media and its narrative management. And state media is already in narrative management mode. This is what the Global Times wrote yesterday. To give one example, quote, The US and NATO are actually part of the cause of this conflict in Ukraine, so if the world lets them dominate public opinion across the international community, it would be unfair and the problem would not be solved. End quote. Okay, next up, major economic and financial developments from the last 24 hours. China's central bank, the People's Bank of China, posted an article yesterday claiming that China won't engage in quantitative easing, nor would it adopt zero or negative interest rates. It noted that global inflation, complexity of external environments, and the rise in geopolitical tensions are all challenges for China, but that the fundamentals of China's broader economy will not change. So basically, everything is fine, nothing to see here. Now, while we're discussing the People's Bank of China, the central bank, in conjunction with China's top banking regulatory agency, is also about to overhaul and rein in the country's $23 trillion market for commercial acceptance bills, a very risky and controversial form of business financing which has caused banks in recent years to collapse, including most infamously Baoshang in Inner Mongolia. The central bank and banking regulatory agency will overhaul the 25-year-old regulations governing the bills this year. Analysts at Yicai observed that the rapid growth in their use in recent years and their involvement in fraudulent financing and other violations spurred regulators to close loopholes and tighten supervision of the instruments. Chinese financial media outlet Caixin had a great piece yesterday giving a deep dive into China's video game industry. The piece argues that the future of Chinese video game companies is quote-unquote hanging in the balance as Beijing's freeze on licenses for new titles enters its 7th month. The National Press and Publication Administration, NPPA, which oversees licensing video games in China, has not published a list of approval for new titles since late last July. Quote, "It's the longest hiatus since Beijing carried out an 8-month hold on giving out licenses back in 2018. End quote. This freeze has become a major headache for the industry, driving many companies out of business. Quoting data from commercial data platform Tianyancha, the piece expressed that during the 6 months between July and December of last year, an incredible 140,000 gaming companies shut down, many times greater than the 18,000 which shut down in the entire 2020 calendar year. And last up, as always, we continue our coverage of the Evergrande crisis and the wider property sector in China, an important forest within the trees that we need to keep an eye on as this slow-moving and months-long crisis continues to unfold. If you guys are enjoying the content, don't forget to hit the like button, it's a huge help. And if you're watching for the first time and you enjoy the content, maybe consider subscribing. I release one of these every day and you'll have the most up-to-date analysis on China when they're released. Right at the beginning of the Evergrande crisis, I said that one of the wild cards will be the behaviour of local governments. The private developers' deleveraging campaign is being championed by the central government and central government regulators, but the cost, putting households and developers aside, is placed on the shoulders of local governments, who lose revenue from land use sales and see economic slowdown and the issues that result from this. As such, there is a real risk, and there has always been a real risk, that local governments would start to backslide on commitments to the centre, undermining central government policy. A little regulatory easing here, local government financing vehicles buying land there. You get the picture. For this video, let's look at part of this. A trend we've been seeing over the last month is that cities are one by one easing rules for home buyers to buy property to help the real estate market, which has been smashed over the last few months. We remember from yesterday's video, this is what Peking University finance professor Michael Pettis called indirect credit support for developers. According to research by industry consultancy Centaline Property, Centaline Property, since mid-January, 15 Chinese provinces and cities have tweaked policies to relax requirements on home purchases, including cutting down payment requirements for certain buyers. But we can go back even further. Supportive policies such as subsidies and tax preferences to stimulate purchases have been rolled out by local authorities since November of last year. However, week after week of bad data, including a collapse of home sales in January, more on this shortly, indicate that these measures are having very little to no effect. What else have we seen from local governments then? Well, we remember 2 weeks ago we covered the city of Heze, H-E-Z-E, in Shandong province in eastern China, which was the first city to seriously bring down down payment ratios for first-time homebuyers, slashing the rate by 10% from 30% to 20%, while lowering mortgage rates also. As we predicted at that time, several other local governments around the country have followed suit, including in Anhui, Jiangxi, Jiangsu, all in eastern provinces, and the municipality of Chongqing in the southwest of the country on the Yangtze River. Analysts argue that these more recent moves from local governments easing on the household side should have a greater effect on the housing market than those earlier moves of late 2021, though they likely will not fix the wider crisis in isolation. According to Lin Bo, general manager of the property think tank China Real Estate Information Corp, quote, land sales in most third and fourth tier cities, mainly large non-capital cities in a province, remained sluggish in January. That indicates continued slowing of the market, adding pressure on both developers and local governments. End quote. We remember that in January, total property sales by area fell 37% month on month and 46% year on year. Sales of new homes by China's top 100 property developers dropped 3.5% to 1.1 trillion RMB, approximately $1.8 trillion in 2021, the first annual decline in more than a decade. Analysts with Chinese financial media outlet Caixin have observed, quote, cutting the size of down payments was one of the most powerful tools adopted by Chinese regulators to counter housing market downturns in 2008 and 2014. But compared with the previous easing campaigns, which were both orchestrated by the central government with nationwide policies, the latest round of easing has been mainly led by local authorities. End quote. Hey guys, I'd love to hear what you thought about some of the updates we covered in today's episode, so throw your comments below. Always love hearing from you. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.